What does it really look like to grow a business to seven figures and beyond? I'm not talking about the pretty story that you read on someone's about page. I'm talking about the fears, the challenges, the mistakes that you make. In this episode, I talk with Kate Ahl and we do a deep dive into what it looks like to go from zero to six figures to seven figures in an agency setting. Kate is super transparent about her journey, and I appreciated it so much. You are going to feel seen and heard if you are having fears and challenges in your business inside of this episode. Kate Ahl, seven figure Pinterest management agency owner, also has a #1 rated podcast for Pinterest management with over 1 million downloads. You're going to be so inspired by this episode. Let's get to it. Kate, I am so excited to chat with you. You're one of my business besties, so this will be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
You are so welcome. I'm delighted to be here. And yes, we can talk all day long and never stop and take a breath, barely.
I would love that, actually. That sounds like a perfect day to me.
Yes.
So, what I want to dive into is really your journey, right? Like how you grew a seven-figure Pinterest agency and what those stages of growth looked like for you. So, first off, you run a seven-figure Pinterest agency. Congratulations. And
Thank
that's
you.
absolutely amazing. I would love to know just kind of how you got started. Let's start at the beginning. Pull me back to 2014, Kate, and tell me what it looked like to start this business that is now grown so immensely.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so actually I'm going to pull back a little bit into 2013 and talk that was post-recession. So 2009, 2011, my husband has lost his job and I started working for a friend on her Frugal and Deal blog, which that's when couponing was taking off and extreme couponing, all that kind of stuff. So I helped her and did a lot of Facebook marketing and affiliate marketing. And throughout that, we started to dabble in Pinterest. We were hearing a little bit about it. But when we got to 2013, two things happened. Facebook changed their business page algorithm for the first time. So it basically shut off the faucet for all these frugal and deal bloggers. And then also, we were living on food stamps and on unemployment. And in August of 2013, I was at her house and I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. We can't just live off the income that I'm getting from you. And now unemployment's running out and jobs were nowhere to be found at that time. And she had just watched a Pinterest webinar. And she was like, you should manage people's Pinterest pages. And I was like, that's the dumbest idea. Nobody's going to say yes to that. They're all going to think it's crazy. And she was like, well, you don't have any other options. So you should do this and I'll help get some beta clients for you. And we'll just try it. So I went home and I was like, okay, what would that look like? I started researching to see were people even having the conversation about Pinterest marketing. And there was beginning rumblings of it because of the Facebook change. And so dove headfirst in it, found a secret Facebook group. It wasn't even like, it was like way before groups were popular and you had to be friends to actually join the group. So it was like this underground, like Pinterest thing. And then I bought the domain in December of 2013 and I named it Simple Pin Media because I really wanted it to be simple. I was like, okay, business owners are struggling with this. We can have a simple solution. I got 3 beta clients in January of 2014 and just said, tell me anything and everything that I do right, that I do wrong. And it ended up working out right. And those 3 turned into 4, 5, 6, and then 8. And then you get to the middle part of the story, but that's how I got started.
Okay. Wow. So, what would you say? I want to dive really into the grow and scale because that's really like the meat I want to get
Yeah.
into, but I don't want to neglect that part of your journey either. What would you say were some of like the challenges if you remember in maybe even like the rapid growth part of it, like transitioning from launching to like starting to really grow? Do you remember like some of the
Yeah.
real challenges that you faced during that point?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was just knowing what people needed because they couldn't really articulate at the time what they needed. And I was kind of guessing at the same time. But I guess I was trying to figure out like what service was best for them. And I just knew management.
Hmm.
But yet there was nobody else I could talk to. I felt like I was on this weird island, like, what are you doing? How much are you charging? So a lot of it was guessing. And I'm not a good guesser. Like, I am an Enneagram 3. I am heavy on the scared of failure piece. And so I was like, am I charging right? Am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? So for me, the biggest thing was whether or not I was growing this in the right way, but I still was very much side hustle at that point. So it was like, I mean, I would take anything and everything. So I was working at my kitchen table. I had three little kids at home. I think one was in kindergarten, one was 4, one was 2. And so it was just navigating this whole life work balance thing. And there just wasn't a lot of conversation about moms doing that. And so I just felt like I was feeling my way in the dark. And that was the biggest challenging thing. Like, am I charging the right price? Am I showing up in the right places? Am I doing Pinterest marketing right?
Hmm.
But there was no anchor. And I love having anchors to kind of like draw on. There was none of those. So for me, that was the biggest challenge.
So, do you feel like that, like figuring out what your audience wants and this whole like, am I doing this right? Do you feel like that's disappeared over the years or is there still some of that there? And like, how have
Oh,
you overcome that?
1000% that's still there. I would say it's taken on different iterations over the years. Whereas in the beginning, it was, I don't know anybody else to look at to wonder if I'm doing this right. Then there became this whole, people were teaching Pinterest, but then I was seeing something different in the
Mm,
data that I had working with clients and trying to reconcile that and questioning whether or not I was doing it right. And then it went into, am I growing a business right? And I had a business coach a couple years ago in 2019 who said, do you realize you said to get it right 7 times in the last 3 minutes? And I was like, no. And she goes, we just need to let that go. And I was
mm,
like, okay. Because there really is no playbook sometimes for the businesses that we're growing. It's not like you can say, here's how to grow a plumbing business. Millions of people have done it before you. There tends to be a general playbook, but there was no playbook for here's how you grow a Pinterest management agency. And I couldn't even call it an agency for a long time. I was like, agencies are like super big and fancy and I'm not, and blah blah blah. So yeah, get it right was a big struggle for me, and it closely mirrored imposter syndrome a lot. Like, ugh, who's going to find out I'm faking this whole thing?
yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I agree with you that I feel like there's points where I'm like, "Oh yeah, I totally used to have that." And then there's parts where I'm like, "Oh man, I still do." I think there is still this like, "All right, I have to figure out like the right way now." It was like, "What's the right way to start a business? What's the best way to grow it? Now what's the best way to scale?" And I'm like, sometimes I'll be searching, searching, searching. And I do think that there is obviously a level where you find people who have gone before you, whether it's the exact same niche or not, or the same industry at all, sometimes or not. And there are like some basic foundational principles that you can learn from business books or courses or coaches or
Mm.
whatever. And then it's like, okay, how do you set that as the foundation? Like, okay, here's some foundational things that we see are true. But then also, like, I am smart. I am capable. I guess I have gotten us this far in business. So I do kind of know what I'm doing. And oh, I listen to my audience, like you have an audience now. So it's not just guesswork of like what's happening. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just totally relate and feel you in that, like, yes, I know what I'm doing, but also I really don't
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yes. And it's good to acknowledge that too, like later down the line, that there is this element of the market shifts. We have a pandemic, like, especially people who, you saw people who are like, here's how to navigate the pandemic. And it's like, you didn't do this either. So you're just guessing too. None of us have been through this. And so that's also an element that when you do think about somebody is communicating the message that, like, oh, they've got it all together, just stand back for just a little bit and go, maybe they don't. Maybe we all don't. And I think I've learned that, and just learning from other business owners that, like, garbage companies or whatever, like, everybody struggles with this piece. It doesn't change. So you do have to come up with tactics and ways to combat it and kind of call it on the carpet, if you will, and interrogate your thoughts and saying, no, I'm not going to go down this path because it's not advantageous for me to do it. I'm going to focus back over here.
Mm. So good. So, would you say, like, as your agency, call it an agency proudly now, that's what it
Yes,
is.
yes.
So, would you say that your agency was more of like a slow, steady growth, or did you have a season of just rapid growth? Like, what was that
Yeah.
growth season like for you?
Yeah, so we had our rapid growth in late 2016, 2017, and it was like we had a wait list of like 100 people, and I didn't have a lot of wisdom about raising my prices, and we just had this massive growth of our email list and awareness, I'd also done a podcast too. And I don't know if I knew the difference between like short, like slow organic growth and like rapid linear growth. I couldn't even have used those terms at the time. But I think I just showed up in the right spaces at the right time. And it kind of was like, oh, you're the person we need to learn from. And it was overwhelming. I will say, matched at the same time personally in our family life, we were fostering at that time. We
Mm.
were going through 18 months of just complete emotional overwhelmness. So I was trying to hire people to, I mean, I look back at that time and it's just kind of like a blur. It's like when you
Yeah.
have a newborn, you're like, I don't remember. So that's what it was, is this very fuzzy time frame of we're going to build the plane as we fly it. And I am more of a fact finder. I'm not a quick start like you. So I get pretty nervous and I'm like, I don't know if we're building it right, but we just kind of kept pushing forward and made a lot of mistakes, but
Mm.
also grew in some good ways that we still use today.
So what were some of like the key lessons that you learned during that phase of rapid growth?
Right. I think one of the things I learned was that the team has to understand the system and I have to help equip them as well to refine the system that works for them. So my brain might be different than my operations person, but she's working closely with the client. So I need to let her creativity run. I need to let people make mistakes and not make
Mm.
them feel bad about those things. I need people to know that there's an open floor to ask questions because we're all asking questions, and then to really lean on the gifts and the strengths and the talents of the women who worked for me. Even if they didn't see it yet, I could see it and say, oh, I know you're good at being a team lead. I need you here. And they're like, oh, do you think so? I'm like, yeah, I do. I do. And that's not just a Hail Mary. It's that I think you're good at it. And then they would be really good at it and trust themselves. And then they would kind of keep elevating. And I think what I learned is sometimes you just have to jump. And it is very hard, especially if you're always looking for the right path, or if you're like me, where you want to do the right thing. Sometimes you just got to say, I don't know what I'm doing, but someone else does. And I'm going to trust them to do it.
Mm.
And I think I also developed our core values through that. Like communication is number one, professionalism is number one. We always say we want to be the Nordstrom of Pinterest marketing. We want you to feel that way when you work with us. And so a lot of that, those tough times really created that true value, what we put value on in our company.
Hmm. Was that so this is like you're starting well, one, you have a wait list of 100 people, like, I don't wanna
I
pass
was an
by that.
idiot. I
That's
know.
insane. That's like,
Mhm.
if there's ever, like, a neon sign of, "It's
Raise your
time to
prices.
hire, raise your
Mhm.
prices," to, like, scale, scale. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, that
So,
was it.
yes,
Mhm.
100%. So, that process, I mean, that process of beginning to let go,
Yeah.
and the not knowing it all, like letting go of some of the control of like this is like the perfect plan to how to grow a
Yeah.
business when you don't know the plan. So letting go of the control of that, letting go of just the control of running the day to day of your business. Like, what were some of the challenges you faced in that? Like some of the
Mm.
mindset of letting go of control.
Yeah. So I really don't struggle with that. I
Okay.
struggle with the opposite, which is
Mm,
abdication. So I tend to be a big idea person and then kind of dump it on people, and the CEO dump and dive, as Kristen
okay.
said, we were together. So I would say that's what I struggled with. And then I left people kind of spinning in my wake a little bit of, I don't really know what to do next. And I also, to my Enneagram 3-ness, like I love bullet points. I love efficiency. I am a straight to the point person. If you give me like a 3-page document, I'm like, I'm not reading it. Like, I will say I did, but I really didn't. So I think what I learned during that time was that, like, I really love team. I love people. And I think when you think of the idea of scale, especially with a services based business, you need people and you need people to replicate you. A lot of people will come to me and they're like, should I hire an admin? No, hire somebody to do your job so that you can be the admin and then you can work your way out of that. But I think that's what I always saw is kind of like, how do I replicate myself in a really great way that, one, helps people feel like they're being led, helps people feel like they can make mistakes, and helps people feel like they're part of a team, and that would breed loyalty, mutual loyalty. My abdication was my big one, is not
Mm,
giving thorough instruction. But I think the other thing was that I've learned is there just were some people I tried to make it work with that I shouldn't have tried to make it work. And it was
mm.
truly when I stood back and realized it was about me. It was about me being successful. It really wasn't about them. And that was a hard truth for me to like stare in the mirror and think about because, you have to, as a leader, be thinking holistically about your team and not just about yourself. And that was a very big eye-opening moment for me that if something's not working, it's not working. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you are a failure. It
Whew.
just means it just didn't work. And I wish I would have learned that a little sooner than I did.
Oh my goodness. So good. So good. I'm curious, and I think I know some of them, but you know your top 5 strengths, right?
Yes.
Can you tell them to me?
Yeah. Communication, number one, belief, responsibility. Where's the other two? Positivity. I've been accused of toxic positivity before by my husband. And then I can't remember the fifth one, but they're all in the
Okay.
relationship and executing. I have hardly any in strategy.
Okay, interesting. So, do you think that's where some of, like, the fear maybe came from in the beginning of, like, just
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
like maybe you were lacking in that area because it wasn't as natural and, like, "Oh, this is" I feel like we all tend to focus on our weaknesses sometimes instead of our strengths, so I was just kinda curious if that was maybe one of the things is that you're like, "Oh, this is my big hole, and this proves how I'm not gonna be successful is because I don't have this strategy wing," or I don't know. Do you think that maybe had part of, like, to do with it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that I don't know if I would say 2017 was like the year of my personality tests. We'll call it that. 2018. I took the Colby, I took the Strengths Finder, and then I took the Enneagram. And then when I put all those together, I realized like, oh, this is how I'm wired, and I'm not wired like somebody else. Like my friend Kelly is super strategic. Like she loves Facebook ads. She loves going into the dashboard. Like that makes me want to poke my eyeballs out. Like I don't even want to open it. But on a high level, I can see vision and I can see team, where she struggles more with the team building aspect. So I see people as my key to growth. Other people see strategic things like Facebook ads as their key to growth. So now, which I didn't see this before, I see the difference between a really good marketer and a really good relationship builder person. And they're very different, right? Like somebody might be so good at copy and they might be so good at Facebook ads and getting people into their funnel and all those kinds of things. And then there might be people like me who are so good at building teams and so good at people keeping people around that I have to hire out for that other thing. But I think in the beginning I thought I was supposed to be good at everything. And I
Mm.
wondered like so and so just made $50,000 off for lunch and I'm like made 10, why do I suck? And then I also had to peel back the layer and say, well, wait a minute, I just made $50,000 in my services side of my business. So come on now.
Wow. Yeah, that's really I think that so I've been totally, like, geeking out, especially this past year over personality and strengths and how do you lead with your strengths because at the end of the day, I mean, it is you. Like you
Hmm.
are the CEO, you make the decisions and your company and your culture and your core values are essentially a reflection of you, right? Like if excellence is one of your core values, like that is actually not one of our core values.
Yes.
Because I mean, to be honest, like I'm an Enneagram 7 and I'm a little bit more, I'm a quick start. And it's just kind of but where action over perfection is actually one
Yep.
of our core values, right? And it's interesting because the more I get in, I kind of feel like there is this element of there's always the comparison. Okay, someone is leading different, but that in essence is a good thing. Like, because if we can lead in our strengths, then that shapes the company. That gives you like a line of like, hey, you're going to love working here and you're going to not love working here.
Mm,
And I think that there is an element sometimes where somebody doesn't work out and it's like, oh, like what did I
yeah.
do wrong? When in reality, it's maybe just not a good culture fit, right? And is that
Mm,
I mean, I know you said one of like the mistakes, maybe if you will, of growing your business was holding on to people too long. Do
yeah.
you feel like it was maybe like a culture values issue or was it something else?
I think it was a little bit of, and I don't know if you've had this too, but there's those points where your systems kind of break, right? As you're scaling, right? And they break because they make space for new things. I think some of our systems were breaking as well as our culture. It was when we were getting ready to lean into implementing the EOS traction system, and that will quickly flesh out. You're either on the bus or you're off the bus. I mean, there's no in between. I think we rode that tension between on the bus and off the bus too long.
Mm,
And I just think it was the beginning of the pandemic too. So I think there were so many cloudy things that were kind of happening. And as you grow, there's an element of wanting to hold on to certain pieces that feel kind of sacred in your growth journey. Like, well, this is just the way that we've always done it, or this is easy, or this is whatever. And I am risk averse, right? Like I'm not somebody who's going to jump into the deep end with both feet right away in cold water. Like you've got to get me to a really good place to do that. So I think it was just one of those things that I just don't know if I could have recognized it sooner because of everything happening all at once. Pandemic, breaking, all these kinds of pieces. But now that I look back on it, I think I have better questions and better tools to evaluate, like, is this team member a good culture fit? Like the one thing we moved to using right after that was Patrick Lencioni's Humble, Hungry, Smart from the Ideal Team Player revolutionized our hiring practices and our hiring system. And we feel like we're able to nail it and coach using it with our existing team to have the right culture. Because Hungry, Humble, Smart is really, yeah, that's the culture that we want. And we just didn't have that tool at the time before.
so good. So in your transition, so we have startup Kate, 2013,
Yes.
2014 startup Kate. We have rapid growth, right? We have a waiting list of 100 people. Then we have starting implementing systems, I'm assuming, and hiring and focusing, like establishing company mission, values, all of the things. Like, what is our company culture?
Mm.
Do you feel like that's the point where you like started becoming CEO? Like, did you feel like a CEO before that point, or do you think that that was kind of the time, or do you feel like that now? Like,
Mm.
where's like your CEO status in that journey? I'm curious.
Right. No, that's really interesting because I think it was like a slow unpacking of it. I think in 2017, I was at a conference where they were talking about like CEO days. And I was kind of like, what's that? Like dreaming into it a little bit, and they said it's a time to set vision and all these kinds of things. And so that peeled back the layer a little bit. And then I think in 2018, 2019, I was working with a coach. And she had asked me that question too, like, what do you envision a CEO looks like? And I was like, man, I don't know. Like, I have this picture of a CEO, and it's usually a man in a boardroom in a high rise, and he's got the corner office, right? Like, I think that's what I grew up with images from movies and all those kinds of things. So then starting to picture the CEO, it was like, okay, I think of like now I can think of Sarah Blakely or other people I'm seeing around, but they're billion-dollar companies. How does that look for me? And I wrestled with it a lot because I felt like if I put in systems where everybody did everything else and I was just the dreamer, would there be room for me? Like, would I have a seat at the table, and what things could I still own? And I truly don't think until this year I have lived into that true CEO role and given myself just 1 to 2 things to focus on. And now I have an integrator because we have EOS and all of that. And now she really runs the day to day of the company. So now I am really freed up to say, oh, what does business development look like for an agency? Like, I don't hear a lot of people talking about that and asking dumb questions, truthfully. Cause I was like, what is business development? I don't know what does that mean? So, kind of on this quest to get Simple Pen Media on people's radar by networking. So,
Mm,
I think I would kind of, I guess, say 2022 for me is the year of learning what it is like to be a CEO and
mm,
how I live into it and what I enjoy about it. Like, I enjoy networking. I don't know if I really understood what that meant, networking for my company or business development for my company. And I don't think I could have before this time. But now I feel like, oh, this is what I was supposed to be doing all along. Here we are. This is fun, So I think that's probably the unpacking of the journey over the last 5 years.
oh my gosh, I love it because what I think is really cool about it is that you had I listened to a leadership talk once about like having white space and how important it
Mm.
is, especially for like CEOs to have white space, right? And so you like systematize hired to where you're like, oh, I have time to be CEO. That's kind of scary. Oh, okay. What does it mean? Defining it. You're still defining it. And it's essentially CEO. A lot of it is the white space to have strategy,
Yeah.
which you've said is one of your weaknesses. But I love that it's almost like ping pong. You're like, okay, not a bad ping pong sounds like a
Yeah.
bad thing. It's a good
No.
thing that it like you're like strategy. So what is Kate Ahl's strategy? Like what does strategy look like for me and who I am and our strengths? And it went straight to relationships. Like I
Yeah.
just think that that's so cool that your strategy is like it came back to your strength. And
Mm.
I think that that is, man, it's just really inspiring because I do think that there is just a lot of pressure and it's I do this all the time where I feel pressure a lot, business or family or kids or whatever. But especially when it comes to business, I'll have like pressure,
Yeah.
pressure, pressure. And then I'm like I did like I'm in my own
Yeah.
I'm in my own prison. No, but like I put this
Right.
stress on myself because this is whatever I want it to be, right? And so
Yes.
I love that when faced with the like, here's the space to get to be the CEO you want to be, that you bounced it
Mm.
right back into your strengths. And I'm just so confident that that's how you'll probably continue to grow is
Yes.
by just being you.
Well, and I love that you connected those dots because, one of the things in that business development journey that I had to uncover, and I always associated it with sales. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to vomit if I think of sales. And I kept getting pitched by a bunch of men to do sales pipelines for agency owners. And I was like, this does not feel right to me. I cannot sit well with this. And so I reached out to the EO group and asked, hey, I just want to meet with like other female agency owners. I don't care what you're in, just agency owners. So I set up 5 to 6 calls with these women for 30 minutes and I just asked their story because I just wanted to learn. And you're right, I didn't connect the dots back to relationships, but like these 5 calls have impacted me so tremendously. And some have led to referrals, but that's not why I did it. I did it was because I needed to see their brains like, how do you think about your agency? What do you go after? And they were like AI or B2B in this crazy space of content marketing, all this stuff. And it was just so inspiring to see these women who were doing these really amazing things, but they weren't on display for the world to see, right? Like oftentimes we gravitate to the Instagram influencer that we see, and there's all these things. But I was like, man, these women are multimillionaires crushing it. And nobody knows about it on Instagram, right? What does that tell you? Right. And that to me was just huge CEO lesson this year.
Mm. Okay, so what's ahead? Like
Mm,
what do you see is like we've talked a lot about kind of challenges at
yeah.
each phase. Do you foresee another challenge like as you go more into scale, as you go more into CEO?
Yeah.
What kind of challenges do you believe are up ahead?
Yeah, I think one that I'm always conscious of and aware of is my agency is built on a social media platform. I don't call it social media, but we're going to call it that. So it's very fluid, it's an ever moving target. And so I understand that that requires us as a company to be very ahead of the curve. So my job is not only just to be CEO of like an agency who maybe does like email marketing or something, but it's CEO of an agency that's Pinterest marketing. So not only do I have to have the pulse on that, I have to have the pulse on my teaching. I have to be in that space and I have to listen to my team with what's working and not working. What are we going to get rid of that maybe we've held so tightly to for a long time and make space for something else? In fact, we're going into a big brainstorming session next month, kind of an ideation innovation, like what's next for Pinterest? Like, who is the ideal customer that we have? Has that changed? Are we serving people who are different? So I think in the next 5 years, it's still continuing to put ourselves in spaces where people don't know about Pinterest. Because what I realized in the last also 6 months of meeting with these people is the ocean is vast with people who are business owners who do not know where to market their business. And that most traditional business owners, and I say traditional versus online because we just think differently, right? They are marketing is last on their list, marketing is first on our list. And so you have these people that are like, oh, Pinterest is an option. Like it's still yet to be discovered. So I feel like there's some discoverability with new client spaces, as well as, my kids are getting older. They're 16, 15, 12, and then our bonus kid who's 6. So I look at like what that looks like for my life as a mom too, and transitioning, getting kids to launch out of my home. And so I want to be CEO visionary, but I also recognize that I can't do the 40-hour work week. I might not even be able to do the 30-hour work week. But I so love Simple Pin Media for the investment that it has made in the lives of the women who work for it and the legacy that I am helping to leave for them. And now we're getting even some second generation, some moms who have, kids in college who are starting to work for us. So how can Simple Pin be a legacy company that lasts for as long as possible to equip and support the women who work for it, and not necessarily prepare for a sell, but prepare for Simple Pin not to be needed, or Kate not to need Simple Pin, and vice versa. Maybe somebody else will come in as CEO and be younger, or be a better visionary. But, I don't know. But I think prepping in the next 5 years to be less present and allowing Simple Pin Media, the brand, to kind of grow on its own as this great educational circle for Pinterest and great management agency for Pinterest that's not so reliant on me.
Mm. I mean, that is incredibly forward thinking, and I love it because I feel like these are the conversations that not a lot of people have. And we could, oh my gosh, go so far just down and do like a
Yeah.
whole talk probably on lessons we're learning in like getting your business to live beyond you, like what does an exit strategy? Because at one point there's an exit, whether it's you're
Yeah.
you're selling or you're just not, able
You're
to run your
closing the
business
domain
anymore.
down. You're
You're
done.
going, yeah, unless you're, yeah. But, I mean, that's what we're literally having the like, hey, we do need to have like a Abby gets hit by a bus plan. We know that, right? Like
Yes,
there needs to,
totally.
and I think it's but it's a cool place to be in business where you can start to not just think about like, okay, how could I sell this or how could I whatever, but like, man, how can my business turn into a legacy and affect people even beyond my lifetime? And what a
Mm.
cool thought. I bet 2013 Kate never would have imagined that would be possible.
2013 Kate was, I don't know who she was, but she different
Right.
for sure. Not the same person.
I want to ask one more question
Yeah.
because you are one of the most driven people. Like you are incredibly driven and I love that about you. It inspires me. And I just because we geek out on Enneagram, like
Yeah.
I know that I'm highly driven by fun and enjoyment and personal pleasure. Like I am
Yes.
very driven by that. Enneagram threes are typically driven by success, but I want to know what is drive for you. And if it
Mm.
is success, I'm imagining that success isn't that like CEO in the tall building with the fancy car or whatever. So what does success look like for you? What is driving you at this point in your business?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I think I'll also say sometimes you got to call as a 3. We're very good at kind of convincing ourselves that it's something different instead of what it really is. And I think I sometimes struggle with that tension of success looks like, notoriety isn't the right word, but being in all the spaces, because I'm such a people person and I'm such a connector, and I love just being with people. But I realized that like that's not what success is for me, because that's kind of a false, that can be very false. And
Mm,
so I walked back from it and said, like, for us, success looks like financial freedom for us. Like it looks like we want to be totally debt free. We're almost done paying off our house. We want to be able to live into experiences with our kids. We want to be able to have an impact on the people who work for us, that they can do those same things too. That Simple Pin will make enough money to not just support my family, but to support them too. And that they want to be here a long time. They're not like, well, this sucks, I'm out of here. And then to be recognized, I think, as somebody who really genuinely cares about people and does care about their business. And then I am transparent and helpful. And those are the things that if I had to say at the end of the day, that people would say about Kate and Simple Pin Media, that they felt that when they came here, that like they never felt like we were selling attainment or false numbers or anything like that, but that we were truly genuinely walking alongside them for a short period of time usually, right? Because people aren't going to need Pinterest marketing forever. There'll go ebbs and flows, but that they could say, we got what we needed and we felt like we were heard and valued and all those kinds of things. And so I think that truly financial freedom and then impact would be probably the two things that, yeah, I want somebody to write about me when I die. Like, don't write about the circles that I was in, write about like how much I, invested in people.
That's so cool. The circles you created, right?
Yeah.
So good. Oh, thank you, Kate. This has seriously been so good.
Mm.
Where can our listeners find out more about you, your agency, Kate Ahl brand, all of it?
Yeah. So simplepinmedia.com, and we are at Simple Pin Media on all channels. And then I also have Kate Ahl, AHL.com. And that's where you can learn more about story. If you want to get coaching for me for growing your own agency or your Pinterest business or anything like that, that's where I talk about it over there. I have podcasts for both. So you can go listen to both those.
All right, everybody, go check it out. It's high value material. I'm telling you, Kate does not produce crappy stuff. She's a real deal. It's like legit her content. So go check it out. Thank you so much again, Kate.
Thanks for having me.